All right, Jeremy and Wendy Myers here once again for a discussion of adventures in fishing for men. And we are in chapter 14, attending the fishing club. Wendy, how long could we talk about this chapter?
A very long time. Very long.
Yeah,
But we aren't going to do that to you.
For the long version, you can read my series of 5 books on Close Your Church for Good.
Yeah.
Basically, this chapter is sort of a summary of a lot of the stuff I cover in those books. Wendy and I obviously are big fans of church. We like church, don't we?
Personally?
No, church itself.
Oh, church? Meaning
Real church.
our bodies, because we are the church? Yes.
Church as the body of Christ.
Yes.
Yes. The way church is done, a lot of times, we're not big fans of.
No. Done in America.
Done in America. Western civilization,
Yeah.
Europe, and other places too sometimes. So that's sort of what this chapter is about. Surprisingly, up to this point, if you haven't noticed, the fisherman has not attended church. That is, he hasn't attended a fishing club.
Correct.
And so he's out and he's wearing a fishing t-shirt at the mall. And so someone comes up to him and says, "Hey, you're a fisherman." You know, like if you're wearing a Christian t-shirt, someone comes up, or you're standing in line at Walmart. "Hey, are you a Christian?" Oh, and then what do they always ask you? What's the first question?
Where do you go to church?
Where do you go to church? Okay, and that's what happens here too. Second paragraph. Where do you attend a fishing club? And it's interesting because church is not someplace you go to.
It's not supposed to be.
Not supposed to be, right? You can't go to church because church is not a place. It's not a building. It's not an event. Church is the people of God,
Right.
and so it's just this whole idea. Where do you go to church? Right from the start, it puts the wrong idea into people's
Right.
into people's minds that church is a place you go to. Anyway,
Which
because
is why I answer that question with, I don't go to church, I am the church.
Yeah. It's a good answer.
That always makes them go, huh?
What? And that's fine because then you can have a conversation about it. Anyway, so he goes. What time? 10:30, Sunday morning.
Don't get any rest. Don't
Yep.
take a break. Don't spend time with your family.
Church lasts for an hour or hour and a half on Sunday morning. Okay, and first thing they do is, he says, the meeting began a little oddly, though. Someone got up and led us all in some fishing songs. Am I the only? I sometimes wonder if I'm the only person.
Teary-eyed.
Did you get teary-eyed?
Yeah.
Oh, they're very emotional songs.
Yes.
About the suffering of a kingfisher.
Yes. Which are manipulated. Literally, we have friends we used to have friends that were the worship leaders, and they take classes on how to manipulate the crowd and their feelings.
Yep.
There are classes for these worship leaders so that they can get the specific emotions out of you that they are hoping to get.
They never call it manipulate,
Well, of course
but that's what
not.
it is. They start off as usually some sort of, welcome, upbeat, rah rah, and then the tempo. It's sort of it gets higher, and then right before it's emotional, slower song to slow you
Right.
down and prepare you for the sermon. Some
Yep.
sort of emotional reaction.
Yep.
Yeah. They take classes and there's courses and that worship leaders can do for this. But I always find it interesting. Men in general don't like to sing.
Neither do our girls. Well, no, one girl in particular that goes to youth group. She hates it. She likes the youth group. She hates the singing.
And so, I mean, in some settings, I guess men will sing. At country concerts, I see men singing along sometimes. Not like the women, though.
Yeah. That's
So,
because a lot of songs are how we have a boyfriend in Jesus, and guys don't really want to
Yeah,
sing that.
we don't
I
wanna
don't really
sing-
want to sing that either.
feeling his breath on my cheek and
That's
stuff.
kinda
Yeah, Jesus, my boyfriend songs are the worst. But I just find it weird that we always, you have to, if you go to your pastor and say, "Pastor, what do you think if this week we don't do any singing in church?" What? No, we have to have singing.
Blasphemous.
Why? Why do we have to have
Because
singing?
we've done it for 2,000
I
years,
know.
Jeremy.
So anyway, Look, there's a place for singing, but we don't have to have 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the length of your sermon or your service, every week, 52 weeks out of the year. You know, you don't.
You don't.
And not everybody has to sing. Just anyway, it's a little pet peeve of mine. This isn't going to take an hour. We're only on the third paragraph
that
here.
is a pet peeve of his.
Okay, let's move on then. Next, visitors are welcomed.
Well, that's always so much fun. We were visitors a lot to a lot of churches because of all of our moves, and it always cracked me up how we were received because it really depended on how we went. Jeremy and I would go a couple times to some churches, just him and I, and we were received decently. It was moderately. Oh, hi, how you doing? Here's a nice young family, blah, blah, come sit down. But then we'd take our 3 young girls. Oh, my word, the church scored the lottery ticket. And we were greeted, and oh, how are your girls? And what can you do? And oh my goodness.
Once when we were living in Dallas, Texas, Wendy was sick or something. I don't remember the situation, but there was a church in town where I decided to go by myself. And I went wearing some jeans with holes in them and a cowboy hat, a baseball hat, not a cowboy hat.
We did set this up.
We did. I wanted to see.
We wanted to see.
And a baseball hat, and I didn't shower for like 3 days. I was a little greasy and grungy, and so I didn't look very good. Guess what kind of a warm welcome I got? None. Nobody said a word to me.
Nope.
So, although I sometimes... I go to grocery stores and nobody says a word to me there either. Wendy will strike up a conversation with somebody at grocery stores. So part of it is my face. I scare people somehow. But anyway, when we go with our kids, we're like, oh, we got to get the young family with kids here.
The family score.
Yeah. So anyway, but it's funny that the welcome, the visitor time, usually it's not very welcoming to the visitors.
It's not. It's very intimidating and aggressive.
It is.
And stand up. I hate the ones where you're in a very small church and they make you stand up in front of everybody. Tell us your name. And you're like, no, I don't want to.
It's a good way to scare your visitors off.
Yes, very good way.
So back when I was a pastor, we did away with that practice. And what I told people is, look, if you see a visitor, it's not our responsibility to make them stand up and make them uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's your responsibility to notice they're there and then before or after the service, go and make them feel welcome.
Yep.
Right? Find out about them and their name that way. We're not going to make them stand up in this. Anyway, again, we could spend hours on this, but we're going to have to move on. He gets this newest book, Your Best Fishing Now. That's a little jab at Joel Osteen and his book, Your Best Life Now. Okay. All right. Then we have the sermon, which he spoke for about half an hour from their fishing manual. That's the Bible.
He got goosebumps. Ooh.
Really good story.
Yeah. Good story.
3 points in a poem.
3 points in a poem.
I once made that joke. I was teaching some men about preaching or something, and I made the joke. They say that a sermon is 3 points in a poem, and some people in the class, that's good. Let me write that down. No. Don't do your sermon 3 points in a poem. That's terrible. Anyway, so he has the fishing club, the sermon at the fishing club. He got goosebumps. Oh, and notice when the teacher gives the application, the primary application of the sermon, of the teaching, is you must be committed to the fishing club.
No, this fishing club.
Not to A, but this one, right?
That would be smart if we said you need to be committed to Christ, but we never say that.
Yeah.
We say you need to be committed to this church.
Right. Yeah.
And that they don't mean this body.
Very often, the application point of sermons is keep coming back, y'all, because you must be coming here. You have to come here. Or are you really a Christian?
Yeah, I need your money.
Right. We need your money, and they do that.
Well, that was the part that it turns out that not very many people in the club actually do any fishing. They just tell stories about their friends they heard. And that was, it's interesting, if you've been at a church for a long time, I think you miss a lot of these nuances. I remember when we were changing churches or trying out churches, because we were trying to figure things out, and we had a lot of moves, and we'd say things to our parents about, you really shouldn't do this, or I think churches need to, you see a lot through fresh eyes when you're the person coming into the church. And this is a big one in that people love to tell you as new people all the amazing missionaries they know, or all the great stories of God doing amazing things in their life. They never share anything real. And I get it, it's, you're the new person, but then we'd stay longer, and those same people that we thought were just telling us a story because we were new, that's all they ever talked about from then on out anyways, that you never got to know the people at that building. Sometimes if you went out with them, they'd start to share a little bit more, but at the actual church building, everybody wears such a mask.
Yeah, lots of masks. Hard to build real relationships only in that building for an hour and a half on Sunday morning, especially when everything's so regimented. You come in, you sit down, sing, prayer, sermon.
Then you got to go get your kids.
And you go home, and it's really hard, nearly impossible. So he does. He hears the fishing stories, and then he meets this. He talks to this white-haired old-timer who turned out to be very encouraging to the fisherman because he'd been a fisherman for 57 years. No, I take that back. He'd been faithfully attending the fishing club for 57 years.
And never once caught a fish.
And in that time, he hasn't caught one fish. But he's fine with that because, as he explains it, one baits the hook, another casts the line, and a third reels in the fish. I see my role as a baiter. Okay, so this is a quote sort of out of 1 Corinthians 3:6. I've heard this said in sermons and books and so on, that, if you aren't building relationships with other people or loving your neighbors or showing the love of Jesus to other people, that's okay. Evangelism is not your gift, and you can just support those
Write the check.
Write the check, send in the money, pray for them. Something else, because 1 Corinthians, remember, even Paul said in 1 Corinthians 3:6, I planted, Apollos watered, and God gave the increase. So, maybe you're a planter, maybe you're a waterer, maybe you're the one that will bring the increase. That's what this white-haired old man is saying.
Sad.
And it is. I mean, it is true there's a gift of evangelism. They are specially gifted for this. But all of us, to some degree or another, are supposed to be in relationships and
right.
loving
there's
other
the
people.
gift of teaching, and there's the gift of grace, and there's the gift of mercy and hospitality. But those are the people that it shines on. But all of us are going to teach our kids something. All of us are going to have people over to our house. All of us. So it's not a.
Yeah. The funny thing about this old man too is, even though he sees himself as a baiter, he doesn't even bait any hooks.
Yeah.
Because you have to go through 4 years of specialized training to know what kind of bait to buy.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about seminary there, Bible college and seminary.
Seminary.
There's a big impression in lots of Christian circles that you really can't do anything serious for God unless you've been to Bible college and seminary.
Or unless you've attended a million conferences and gone through 1,000 Bible studies.
Something like that.
Signed on the dotted line to every mission statement.
Yep.
Which is sad, because you talk about this in a lot of your other books. All that does is breed educated fools, in a sense, where they know everything that looks good in a textbook, but they know nothing about personal relationships, which is the only way that you can actually get someone to understand and know God, is through a relationship. But they think that that's what everybody should do, so they keep telling everybody, oh, just read more, study more, and then it just breeds more of that hunger for education, and nobody's ever actually going and living and loving.
When I was in Bible college and seminary, I don't know how many different professors I had who taught classes on pastoral ministry and pastoral leadership, pastoral counseling, these sorts of things.
They've never been a pastor.
All but one had never been a pastor. Well, I take that back. They were a pastor for about 1 or 2 years when they first got out of seminary, realized they hated it, and the people didn't like them. It was a horrible experience. So they said, you know what, I'm going to go teach. And so here they are. And the one who did, though, and he was still a pastor when he was a professor as well, one of the best seminary professors I've ever had.
Who was it?
Meeks was his name.
Oh, I remember.
So, Meeks.
Yeah.
But anyway, Dr. Meeks. Anyway, really, really good pastoral ministry class. But anyway, yeah. What do they say? Those who can't do, teach.
And I hate that because I'm a teacher.
Yes. Wendy can do and teach. She's really good at, but that's the thing. You're one of the best teachers that the kids have ever had.
Oh, I don't know, but I'm a
The
good
best
teacher.
teachers are those who can do it and then also teach it. So not everybody who can do it can teach it, but hopefully if you teach it, you can also do it.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. What's next?
Next.
Oh, they have this evangelism committee. Takes like 17 people to bait one hook.
Oh yeah.
The
6-week attendance.
the membership.
Class, membership class.
Membership classes.
Yeah, that's so much fun.
How much trouble do I want to get myself in here?
I think they're already getting bored listening to
Many, many years ago, a church growth leadership guru wrote a book called I Am a Church Member. And I wrote a review of it on Amazon. This was maybe 8 or 9 years ago I wrote that review. And I apologize to the author if you ever listen to this. It was a 1-star review. But that's because the author in the book basically said, if you don't attend a membership class in a church, then you're not really a member of the church.
Yeah, that's wrong.
And I said, no, the membership class doesn't make you a member of the church.
Right.
Believing in Jesus makes you a member of the church. When you believe you're born again, you're born into the family of God, you're the church. And I said this in my review. And to this very day, I still get people blasting me. I get email notifications,
seriously?
on Amazon. I can't believe that you're disagreeing with this. Don't you know? And they quote verses at me and stuff about how wrong I am. And we have to go through the membership class at the church in order to truly be a committed member of the church. And if you don't go through the membership class, maybe you're not really a Christian. So,
Brainwashed a few too many.
yeah, anyway.
Well, it's just the most sad part about that is that people think that they have to go through that. I mean, that's terrible. Number one, going to church takes enough time as it is, and it should be. I mean, that's why I love the title. It's the club, because I wish Christians could just be honest about what church is to them. And if I met one church-going Christian who was like, yeah, I go to my social club every Sunday, I'd be like, thank you. I'm glad it's good for you. And that's what our middle daughter goes to youth group for. She doesn't go to listen to the sermon or sing songs. She goes because she likes to hang out with 3 of her friends. And that's it. And she's honest about it. She will flat out tell you, I go to youth group to hang out with my friends. I love it. And we've taught her right. Be honest.
Yeah. What happens in these buildings on Sunday morning? It's a good social club.
Yeah, but it's a social club.
But it is a social
and
club.
so being holier than thou about going to church is wrong, because I have my own social club. It's called the gym, workout gym.
Yeah, and you build great relationships there.
Or it's the winery where I work, or the school that I work at. Those are my social clubs. Or the girls' activities, because I'm there with all the parents. I don't need a...
And because religion isn't mixed in a lot of those settings, the relationships you build there
so much better.
are better than what often happens in that church
better.
social club, where people are hiding, putting on the masks, as you said earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't want to show who they really are, show their weaknesses and their
Right.
failures and their temptations and struggles and doubts. But you don't have as much of that at the gym or the winery.
No, it's so nice.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're fine. I mean, church can be a good social club for people, and the guilt trips, though, need to stop.
It can be a great social
It
club,
can
but
be.
that's what it is. It's your social club.
And it would be better if people would call it that. If
They would
everybody
just be
recognized,
honest.
look, we're just going here to meet other like-minded people,
Yeah.
and we have some interests in common, and so we're going to hang out, get to know each other. Great, wonderful. Sing some songs. Okay.
It'd be like me guilting everybody about not attending the gym. What?
Right.
You're not taking care of your body? What?
Well, and some people do that.
Okay, well, not me.
I'm not saying you, but some people do.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway. Then they go into baptism. Yeah, we don't need to say anything about that. Tithing.
Another sad issue of the church.
Yep.
Spend your money on air conditioning, pews, choir robes, parking lots instead of feeding the hungry, saving girls from sex trafficking, changing the water in the rest of the world so everybody can have water.
It's very interesting. Tithing, they often call it giving money back to God. But who are you giving the money to?
Church.
Church. And then what is the church spending the money on?
Actually, the church building, because the church would be at. Yeah.
Well, right, the building and the people who work there. And then they spend the money on that. And then some of it goes to ministry of sorts.
Yes, and I always loved my parents' church, College Church in Wheaton. Sorry, it's going to get blasted. Way too many years. They give 51% of their budget to missions.
Which is good.
Which is great. But they always claim that and stand on that like a claim to fame. Well, that's great. But their 49% of the budget that they spend on the church is more than, it's astronomical.
Millions and millions of dollars.
Astronomical. It's sick. Their choir robes for their little kids, 4 to 7-year-olds one year, $5,000 on 5 to 7-year-old choir robes. I'm sorry, that's disgusting.
So it's good that they're giving 51%, but the 49%, it's like it's like
they
a
could
guy.
Be giving 98%.
Yeah, it'd be like a guy who makes $1 billion a year saying, "Look at me, I give away 90% of my income. Everybody should give away 90%." You think, well, great, 90%. You're giving away $900 million. Good for you, really. I mean, good. $900 million given away is fantastic. But you're still living on $100 million.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And that was my big frustration with college churches because it's the biggest church in Wheaton, and there's more churches per capita or per square mile or whatever than any place in America. Yeah. And a lot of those churches are small, but those small churches were doing much more, in my opinion. Because, yeah, they were only giving 20% of their income to missions, but it was, their 20% was so much more in the long run. And they didn't brag about it.
And they didn't brag about it. Okay, next they talk, this was just this whole thing about the high cost of discipleship, and they talk about cheap fishing, which is sort of you hear about cheap grace all the time. I'm big into free grace. There's no such thing as cheap grace.
No, you can't call what Jesus did on the cross cheap.
No, it costs God, it costs Jesus everything, so that it's free for us. There's no such thing as cheap. So anyway, just a little thing of mine that I threw in there, very important. But you hear about it in churches a lot. And of course, what do they mean by discipleship? Attend church.
Attend church, attend the Wednesday night, attend the Bible study. Yeah.
All right, moving on. Oh, and then we have a section, several pages here where he has a conversation with his neighbor. Again, this is new to the book based on Wendy's recommendations, and lots of these sections she wrote largely. No, it made the book better. And so this is one of those new sections. If you have one of the old versions of the book, then you'll want to make sure you get the newest book so that you see how the book all fits together a little better. But basically what happens is, at the end, before he leaves the church, he agrees to give the church all of his fishing equipment. His boat and his poles and everything. And so he's packing it all up, and his neighbor comes out and says, "What are you doing?" Yeah. And his neighbor says, "Oh, you said you were going to give it to the fishing club?" He says, "Look, they don't need it." And he even says, "I used to attend a fishing club," but he doesn't anymore.
Yeah, I liked his statement. He says, "I found it got in the way of actual fishing." Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what our family has discovered, that church, I hate saying that because church means something different to us. Church means us. The 4 square walls of the church building got in the way so much to our living our lives as Christians, as followers of Christ, as who God wanted me to be. Yeah, definitely got in the way.
Yeah, and that's why I put this in there. Lots of people who are no longer attending that Sunday morning service. It's not because they've abandoned Jesus or turning their back on the church or have backslidden or carnal Christians, anything like that. In a lot of cases,
this is what we get called.
We do. Yeah, oh yeah. If you leave that, everybody who's still there will call you those things because they have to justify it in their own mind to some degree. there's other reasons as well. But for people like us, and I was talking with Richard Jacobson this week on my podcast about his book Unchurching, and he mentioned that recent studies have shown that there are roughly 64 million people in the last, I don't know how many years, 64 million people actually right now in United States who used to attend church and no longer do.
Seriously?
And estimates are that at least half of those, and that's a very conservative estimate, they're no longer attending church, but they are still loving and serving Jesus and wanting to follow God. And they found a more relational, organic, natural way of doing it. And every single one of them says this.
Yeah.
Going to that place on Sunday morning, doing those activities, it got in the way of me actually loving other people and feeling connected to God.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, just the actual act of going to church on Sunday. You're rushed. There's no sleeping in if that's your day where nobody's working. Never been for us because pastor family, but just that act of not getting to sleep in and then rushing around, not getting breakfast with your family. There arguments happen. You all know it. It does. It happens with the best of our family. It's going to happen between two kids or a mom and a kid or a dad and a kid or a dad. There's way too many relationships that are in a rush for something not to happen. And then you get there and the parents are stripped away from the kids. So it's not even really good quality family time. And then the kids go and get a snack and do a craft and sing some songs and hear a devotional that they're going to forget in 5 minutes. And the parents go and sing some songs and do some devotionals and give some cash and then have some fake conversations. And then they all get in the car and they're hungry and mom doesn't have time to fix dinner. Or if she does, then she goes back and she rushes around the kitchen, doesn't get a break. It just, the whole thing. Whereas now, if you don't go to those 4 square walls, you can spend that time with your kids, with your spouse, catching up, or just take a walk, or spend that time not necessarily with your family, but you get things done and then you have more energy and you can go to the store and be kind and do something for your neighbor because you're outside, and it snowballs into something so great. And it takes time to meet those relationships. And sometimes Sunday just gets filled with other things, but you get those things done so that then during the week you have time to be kind and gracious to the people that you would normally have been stressed out to meet because it was just one more thing on your plate.
Yeah, you don't have to, and some people might feel guilty. Well, I'm not reserving this 2 hours on Sunday morning for God anymore. I spent it paying bills or sleeping in. But as Wendy just pointed out, even if that happens, what's happening in your mind and during your life is it frees you up now to actually be the church the rest of the week, because you no longer think of the church as that hour and a half, 2 hours on Sunday morning.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you said
huge.
it perfectly. It frees you up. Even if you do spend that time getting some extra sleep, spending some time with your family, paying your bills, whatever.
Well, because for the general population that go to church, to their social club, it's not just Sunday either.
Yeah.
It's youth group for all the kids, which yes,
True.
Our daughter does go, but and then it's also the Bible studies, and then it's the commitments that you make to teach things or lead things or do things. It encompasses your entire life.
Yeah. So it's good that the man says that here, and if that's sort of where you're at, you might feel alone, but actually it is a growing segment of the worldwide Christian population, and I believe that God is calling more and more people on this path. So not everybody. If you're comfortable where you're going and you're fine there, and
if
you
like
disagree,
your social club, and keep enjoying your social club.
Yeah,
it's a good social club.
it is.
But that's all it is.
It is. Yeah. Still try to be the church the rest of the week.
Yeah, that's the hard thing. It's when
Right.
you're so stressed out from being the social club so many times a week, it's hard to be loving the rest.
So he has this conversation. Just moving on. Is that fine?
That's moving on.
He has this conversation. He gets an opportunity to quote from the fishing manual. Makes him feel good. It felt good to quote some of what I'd learned in the fishing club that morning.
Oh, Christians and their quotes.
Quoting Bible verses.
How misused
Well, my
they
pastor
are.
says. And, that's the extent of what we often get from church, is being able to bash other people over the head with Bible verses and pastor quotes.
Yep.
And the funny thing is the neighbor makes some good points about why he shouldn't donate all of his stuff to the church. But he doesn't want to admit that to his neighbor.
Right.
And so instead he says, I'm a man of my word and I keep my promises. But one paragraph later, he stuffs it all in his garage, and he does keep it. But he doesn't want to tell his neighbor that he kept it.
But that's another sign of just how the church manipulates. They don't need it. And even to tell somebody, hey, we'll take $40,000 in all of your stuff, instead of probably what would have accumulated as $5,000 in dues.
Yeah.
I'm fine saying that. And it's just wrong.
And of course, his wife complains because now she can't.
So we have marital problems.
Marital problems. And he tells her, well, sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the fishing club. But who's making the sacrifice?
She is.
She is.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in Christian churchy circles, the person who is talking most about making sacrifices usually is the one sacrificing the least. They are telling everybody else, hey, you need to sacrifice by giving of your time and your money and your emotions, and even sacrificing your family to come help me in what we're doing over here. And that's exactly what he's doing.
He's not paying attention to her, or her needs, or her desires, or what she wants to do. She's now broke. They are in debt. And she's trying to keep working and keep the family afloat while he's... Yeah, it makes for very harsh... And again, that's all the things that add to that Sunday morning. A lot of times, as Jeremy said before, guys don't like to sing. Well, a lot of guys don't even like to go to church. Yeah. So you've got that whole stress dynamic that's playing out every Sunday again and again and again.
Yep. So the chapter ends with her giving him an ultimatum. Basically, she says, choose between the hobby or me. And that makes him pretty upset. But he goes back, even though he has broken his promises, broken his word, he goes back to saying, I'm a man of my word, I keep my promises. And so he chooses his fishing gear over his wife and ends up having to sleep out in the garage on the couch with all of his fishing gear.
Fine, you should have let him sleep in his boat.
Yeah. Go sleep in your boat. And he says at first he feels a little guilty, but at least, he says he turned on the radio because he didn't have his TV anymore. From Trinity Broadcasting Network, and the first song he heard was "I'm Gonna Miss Her" by Brad Paisley, and he says that made it clear that this was a clear sign I had made the right choice. So I don't think because of copyright laws I can include that video or that song right here on the video, but I am going to include it in the lesson notes for this lesson. I'm going to put a link to the YouTube video because it is hilarious.
And it's actually Brad Paisley and his wife.
Yeah, it's actually Brad Paisley and his wife. Yeah. All right, so the two people are Brad Paisley and his wife, and it's just funny. But so the guy hears this song on the radio, and that's what Brad Paisley chooses. He chooses fishing over his wife, and so this guy says, "Oh, I clearly made the right choice in choosing fishing over my wife." Wrong choice. Wrong choice. So. All right, it was only 30 minutes, Wendy, 31 minutes. That's not so bad.
That's not so bad for a church one.
I did have to shut myself up several times. We could have gone for hours, but... All right, that was chapter 14. Next, chapter 15, we will be discussing learning the lingo. Do Christians have lingo?
And the more you're out of those four square walls, the more insanely ridiculous it sounds. Insane.
I'll talk about it in the next lesson, but just this very last week, I got into a Twitter argument with some lady because I have a blog post on my blog that tells people, look, you got to stop saying Christian cliches like, I'm going to pray a hedge around you, brother. Oh. What does that mean? Pray a hedge around you? A hedge? It's just like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Build me a shrubbery!
Shut it
Anyway,
off.
we'll talk about that in the next lesson a little bit more. All right, see you there.